on an existing client's estate tax issue, and kind of he's finally ready to talk about it. We talked with the estate attorneys last week. So again, this is just another sample of, I'm just trying to get you guys to see different things so you guys can feel prepared when you guys come across certain situations. My biggest advice when it comes to those types of cases is, number one, you're not used to it, bring somebody else in, because they will sniff out somebody that knows what they're doing and somebody that doesn't. So that's my number one advice. It took me probably 5 of these types of cases before I felt comfortable, because ultimately you are teaming up and you are working, or should be working, with an estate planning attorney of some kind. Okay? So the goal is to, whether they already have one, whether you're referring to one that you know, your job is to recognize, hey, you're going to have this problem. What's the solution to this problem? And then it takes a long time to find an estate planning attorney. Most estate planning attorneys do not know insurance. They get paid to set up the plan. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit, like, very high level, because I just want to show you guys kind of okay, there we go. Let's see if now we connect to the internet here. So again, when we're talking about AC, they change the password like every. Sorry guys. Been dealing with this all morning, and I finally got the new Wi-Fi password. Okay, so when you're talking about, for those that don't know, we'll talk really high level, really fast, is when you're dealing with estate taxes and things like that, right? Basically what's happening is the government has set these estate tax levels that are actually sunsetting at the end of next year. So you're probably going to hear more and more people talk about it next year as well as 2026. Okay? So basically, the way that it is right now is you have a 13,000. Let me share my screen so you guys can see what this is coming directly from the IRS site, so you guys can kind of see. Okay, so right here, basic exclusion of 13.9 million. Okay, so that's basically saying each person has that much of an exclusion. So right now, before you have to have basically an estate worth 25 million or more to kind of have this problem. Okay, that's as of 2024. But when you look at the sunset provisions, okay, that will drop to 5 million. Okay, so that means if you can imagine, there's a ton of people that have an estate tax above 10 million, right? Because it's 5 million per person, versus people that have one over 25 million. There's a large portion of people that have an estate worth 10 to 25 million compared to 25 and above. Okay, so that's kind of like the first thing. Then you see, okay, here's what the estate tax rate is on that million. Okay, And so if you have an estate tax of worth more than $1 million, you get taxed at 40%. Okay? So that's how this works. Is everybody with me so far? I'm just talking very high level right now. Any questions? Okay. So when this sunsets, okay, we now have so now this is where these things come in. Unfortunately, the software that I usually run to run this report is down. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to show how you can kind of like calculate things through free calculators, but it definitely helps if you have some really nice polished report when you're actually presenting. So I won't have that for you guys today, but because the software system that I use is down somehow. But anyway, so I'd like somebody to get a little bit of practice. So while we're talking through this next set, so you guys can kind of see the sample, somebody Google future value calculator. If you have it on your phone, if you have something, I don't care how you do it. So this person right now is 47 years old, okay? And he has a business, or let's just say a net worth that is conservatively probably worth $25 million, okay? He plans on selling this business within the next 5 years. So we're going to be super conservative with all of our assumptions, and we're going to assume life expectancy at 85 is usually what I do. And so basically somebody volunteer 25 million, 3% growth for 38 years. What does that 25 million grow to? Okay. Now, this is just to give the concept of the estate planning attorney an idea, as well as the client, like, hey, here's what the problem could be, right? And unfortunately, all of the software, they don't let you assume and plan for what the rates are going to be. So it only lets you plan for what it is today. And then number two, the next item is, okay, how do we solve this problem, right? Or what are the solutions to the problem, which is what we're going to go through. So let me know when you have that number. I kind of know what it should be near. So we'll see if, and then let's start talking through some of the options.
25 over 25 years at 3%?
25 million at 3% a year for 38 years.
38. Okay. If this calculator is correct, it's 76,869.
Yep. Okay. So let's just say that in 38 years, his estate is going to be worth $75 million. Okay. Let's keep it nice and round. Okay. So right here, this is a free estate tax calculator on the website, right? I'm putting it in all under one section, but I could have done it more. Okay. 75 million, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So for 2024, okay, I'm showing a little bit of, okay, 500,000 in claims, expenses, administration, funeral, whatever, probate, attorneys, taxes, like it's expensive when you're worth that much and when you have assets all over the place. So charitable contributions, and again, I'll change it to 150,000. Charitable contributions. I know the guy wants to give a lot of money to charity. He's a big animal guy. He's a high end. He runs a big veterinarian practice. Okay, he's a veterinarian neurosurgeon, so to speak. So, in all actuality, that's what he does. He's got like 7 locations now. Owns all the buildings. He will eventually sell. If you want if any kids want to be a veterinarian, tell them to go to extra school and become a neurosurgical vet, and they will make about 4 times as much money. And then I'm assuming he's going to give some gifted to kids and family or whatever. Okay, so these are the assumptions. This is what his estate tax is worth. So at this level, right, his exempted is 57. Okay, he is going to owe $23 million in estate taxes.
Shit.
Okay.
Jesus.
And then the after-tax value is $46 million. Now, there's plenty of things that he can start doing to get through this, and that's what we're about to talk about. Okay. And again, this is where you want the attorney to be saying these things, because you guys, none of us are estate planning. None of us are licensed estate tax professionals. Okay. So right now, what we're going to say, okay, 25 million is the problem. Okay. So now, option one, okay, is liquidate investments.
Tyler, can you make that screen large?
If you click on it, it should get big.
No. Okay.
Like, click on my name and it should get large. And let me know if it doesn't. So liquidate investments to pay this. Okay? So that's number one. Number two, so if anybody doesn't know, that is a terrible idea. Okay? I'm just going to throw that out there. So number two is the attorney, right, start moving certain assets, right, out of the estate. Okay? And so for all you individuals that like think a revocable trust is going to solve these problems, that is not. You have to have irrevocable trusts. Okay? That's what moves it officially out of an estate. Okay? Basically, and I'm not an expert in this is why you work with attorneys, but like the grantor and the trustee start to be different people than the guy, then have to be different. There's a bunch of rules along this, right? So that's where the estate. So the question is how much, right? So the $1 million question is how much can be moved, right? Right? And so that's the $1 million question number one, is how much can the estate planning attorney move out of the client's estate, meaning you have or let's do it this way. Hold on. Okay, so you have client. You have so certain assets can be moved into the estate while other assets are going to remain inside the estate. So you have, this line here represents death, okay? And so let's just say out of that 75 million, right, this client was able to move $25 million is now sitting here, and now $50 million is sitting here. This is what he's going to pay taxes on, okay? So I'm going to assume that the attorney can at least do that, okay? So we're going to adjust that 50. Is everybody with me so far? I just want people to kind of understand where things are coming from. Any questions? Okay. Again, I can't see the chat. So if anybody has like major question, you got to speak up. Okay. So at this stage, right, this 25 million is out of the estate. However they set it up inside trusts, whatever, right? this 50 million, we now have the estate tax. So I just reran that number really quickly. He's going to owe about 13 million. Okay. So again, the attorney might be able to take this, right? But on top of that here's the other questions. What are the estate levels going to be in 35 years, right? We don't know. I can tell you that it's going to be lower in 2025 than it is today, right? So that's another big question. Okay. And then the last one is, so how much can be moved? The estate tax levels, those are things that we can't answer. Okay. So what we can answer is, what is the best way to pay these dollars? Okay. And any really good estate planning attorney will agree with you. The best way to pay these dollars is the insurance. Okay? Now, this is not a banking play. This is not a cash play. This is an estate planning play. Okay? So ultimately, like super high level, okay, you have client, right? And you have an irrevocable irrevocable is the key word. Now, I know some attorneys are getting fancy and kind of setting it up to where you have some access to these dollars. I would not get into that. I'm gonna talk about the product today. I'm not gonna talk about the chassis. Okay? But for the most part, right, this client is using gifting, right? Because you have those gifting exclusions that were included. So we say, okay, we have $2 million in gifting. And so over the next 20 years, we're going to use this $2 million gifting to pay premiums into this bucket. And this bucket is going to generate a lot of extra non-taxable money. Okay, that's out of the estate. At the end of this dollar amount, right, the beneficiaries can then use this money to pay, right? So we're lowering the estate tax here by using this exclusion, right? And hopefully taking a large chunk out of the estate. And then we're getting a big lump sum of money that's out of the estate that we can then use to pay whatever is left, or pay a portion or whatever. Okay? So everybody kind of get that. Very, very high level. There's a lot of extra stuff in there. Okay? So now we're going to talk about what is the best way to do this. This is what the rest of today is going to be about. Okay? Any questions? Nothing so far? Okay. So basically you have three ways to fund these, right? And it boils down to the three types of policies. Number one is term. Number two is GUL. And number three is whole life. All right, does anybody want to take a wild stab about why an estate planning attorney would not like number three? Anybody want to take a guess of why?
Too expensive in the beginning.
It's expensive in the beginning. Why else?
What happened here?
It's part of the answer. That's good. That's part of the answer. I'm looking for another half though.
Hidden cost.
Say that again. Who said that?
Like hidden cost.
Yeah. So both are right. So number one, estate plannings or attorney, our number one thing is cost, right? Cost per death benefit, right? Because we all know that this cost is going to generate cash value. But if we remember, and again, I've only seen a few estate planning attorneys doing it the really, really creative way, so odds are they're not going to do it this way. But this money right here is no longer in the estate, right? It's now not in his name. It's in the estate, right? And so all of this cash value growth, right? The client has a very difficult time getting access to this. Okay? Because it's not in his name. It is owned by the trust, and so there's a lot of hoops that you have to do in order to get access to those dollars inside of an irrevocable trust. Okay? So that's why complexity, right? Which hopefully you guys can see how that can be more complex. People necessarily do not always like complexity. Okay? So, especially when you're not getting paid for all, you know what I mean? So just keep that in mind. So cost, and then harder to access the cash. So between those two kind of points, there isn't really a whole lot of benefit to have a whole life inside of there, right? Unless, and we're going to talk about some of those benefits in a second, okay? Everybody with me so far? Okay. Now, everything that I ran, so this guy is 47, okay? So male age 47 and female age 47. Okay, so they're both 47. Okay? Everything that I'm running is I am solving for $5 million. Okay? Again, this is not, I'm going to show the estate planning attorney that, hey, that's clearly more than likely, right? $5 million is not going to solve this guy's problem, right? But it's more of a number that I can say, hey, it's a good starting place, right? Because he's worth $25 million right now. Technically, I'm assuming that his estate's going to grow. It may not grow. We'll meet somewhere in the middle. It's when you look at the prices for somebody that's making as much money as he is, it's not some huge premium every year in the grand scheme of things. And so that's kind of why I'm starting there. And then with my graphs and my report, and when I sit with the client and the attorney and the CPA and really start going through and getting into it, that's when we'll say, oh no, we need at least 10 million. We need at least 7 million, or the estate planning attorney is going to come back and tell me how much he thinks we should have. Okay. Or they'll say, well, what do you think? This seems a little low. I'm going to say, well, you could go the route of 5 million on each of them. You could go 10 million on a survivorship. So that's what we're going to talk about next. But to give the idea of when you're dealing with these types of cases, I don't want to talk super, super in depth today, because I know some of this is your first time ever seeing these or hearing kind of these types of things. So you're having a meeting with two other you're having a meeting with a CPA most likely, and you're having a meeting with an attorney to get these types of cases paid for, unless you have a good relationship with the guy, and the guy's like, yeah, my attorney told me I need 5 million. He told me to get it resolved. In which case, lucky you. Okay? So, 47-year-old male, we're going to run it. He's the primary breadwinner. We're going to run everything on him to start. Okay? So, I'm going to start with the GUL. GUL, guaranteed. UL, I describe this as, for those that aren't familiar with it, lifetime term. Okay, it's going to have no cash, but it's going to be guaranteed to age 100. So the big keyword here is to age 100. Okay. Now, there's some of the GULs that have the chronic illness riders on them. For the most part, again, it's extra money for something that he doesn't really need, right? If he's got $25 million. I think he can afford some care. So again, it's boiled down to price. Okay, so for $5 million, GUL is 30. Like I'm gonna round up. It's close. Or no, sorry, 40,000. Okay, so if he lives 30 years, right? So like, I'm not going to go through this. I'm just going through it I wouldn't go through this with them unless they ask, right? But he's putting in 1.2 million, right? And if you guys notice, that's exactly the gift kind of level per individual. So he's put in 1.2 million to get 5 million. It's a pretty good deal. All for like, he's getting the gift exclusion plus he's getting 5 million that will now be outside of the estate upon his passing. Okay? So this is the GUL.
Tyler, is it?
Now, the other thing that you can do, and the reason why, can somebody give me a reason of, and it should be relatively, it's not a trick question, but why would you ever put term insurance on a place like this? And Kate, go ahead. I see somebody raise their hand, so go ahead and talk.
I just had a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So who's gonna own this GUL?
So this would be the trust. Like in this case, the trust would own it, and this guy would be the insured.
Okay.
So the trust is the owner and the beneficiary. The insured is technically the trust is also the payer, but technically the guy's basically gifting money to the trust, and the trust is paying the premium. So most insurance carriers don't really. It doesn't have to exchange hands like that. But the insured is the payer and the insured. The trust is the owner and the beneficiary. And the trust is outside of his estate. If the estate planning attorney does it that way. There's a lot of different ways to skin the cat. This is just like the most common way that I see it.
And the trust you're talking about was the irrevocable trust?
Yeah, so if you have estate tax problems, now I'm not saying that like in the future they might change it to a irrevocable trust. I'm not saying they're going to do it from the start, but eventually they will be changing it to an irrevocable trust, because that's the way to shift it. Not in a revocable trust doesn't eliminate you from the estate taxes, because a revocable trust is still in your estate, right? Because I'm the owner and I can control it completely. Okay. The as soon as I take it to an irrevocable, right, means I can't really change it very easily anymore. Whoever I listed has to change it and do all these fancy things. So you will come across a lot of people that will make the irrevocable trust their owner and beneficiary or the payer. But the revocable means I can alter it, and I have a revocable trust. I can change it for any reason, whatever I want, no questions asked, easy peasy. If I had an irrevocable trust, it's very difficult to change it. So that's just kind of the difference.
I know that there's like some time frame of when they switch it over. There's like a 3-year like time frame that it still becomes part of their estate if they do it within 3 years.
Yeah, that's why I don't.
Oh, I know.
I don't
I'm taking
recommend
a master's
any
in taxation.
Yeah, I don't give any of that stuff. I just go high level with the client, and I'm like, hey, we need to bring in a CPA, and we need to bring in not just any CPA. For this guy, I know the CPA, right? So I've worked with the CPA. But if you have a client that's worth this much money, you'd be like, hey, a CPA is like an estate planning CPA, right? Like, it's not just like the same local CPA that you're using. Like, you want a CPA that like that's what they do is estate planning. Okay?
Not all CPA know tax. Just saying.
Well, they all know tax, but there's a big difference between
Tax planning.
there's a big difference between tax planning and estate planning. Big difference.
Hello, my name is Derek Lynn, a licensed agent with Devoted Health, where we offer Medicare Advantage plan with.
So again, I'm not telling you guys what CPA to use. I'm just being careful on just because of CPA. Like for example, my wife is a very good CPA, and her firm has a estate tax division, and the knowledge that those people have compared to what she has is night and day. If it comes to real estate, my wife is, top 5%. But if there's different fields for a reason. So just keep that in mind. Just like every life insurance agent doesn't understand IBC. Okay? So just keep that in mind when you're talking to, just like technically every attorney can write up a will and a trust and handle this, but it's like you wouldn't go to a PI attorney to drop your will and trust. You would go to an estate planning attorney that specializes in estate planning. So again, I leave those decisions and discussions with, especially for a guy of this net worth. If there's a guy right on the bubble, then you can say, hey, all right, you're gonna have a couple $1 million. All right, let's get a little bit of insurance. As your net worth grows, we can figure it out. But somebody like this, who already has the team in place, that I was actually referred in by the CPA to further this discussion, the estate planning attorney is going to tell me like how he's going to set it up. So I know this guy, he's going to do an irrevocable trust right from the get-go, and I don't have to worry about it. But I don't give that advice, and I wouldn't recommend any of you to give that advice either on how they should set it up. Now, does that answer the question? Does that make sense, at least?
Yeah.
Okay. So, now, this is not designed to be a trick question. So, why would somebody do term insurance now in an ILET? Why would you put term insurance in an ILET? Why would you try to fund your estate with term insurance?
Probably more affordable. Is it more affordable, probably?
Okay, that's one reason. That's part of the reason. That's part of the answer. Why else?
Conversion. I mean, I guess you could convert the life insurance policy later, but also the premiums going in are much lower, so you get a bigger exemption effectively.
Yeah, so that's exactly it. So maybe the client's not ready for a $40,000 premium, right? And so you say, hey, you can pay $40,000 now, or we can pay. Let me pull it up here. So this is where it's key to make sure you pick a term carrier that is convertible to the right GUL product and all those things. And so, we're making sure I got that right around. So I'm going to say, go back to this, right? Okay, so same 5 million. And it's about $8,500. Okay, and that's for a 20-year term. Okay, so now, if something happens to him in the next, so here's the question that I always tell people, or I always say, and I use this line quite a bit. And Logan, I'm going to ask you. Logan, if you knew you were going to die in 3 years, what kind of insurance would you buy?
Term.
Yep, perfect, right? So if anybody was dying in 20 years, you would buy as much term insurance as you could afford. You would probably not buy very much whole life insurance because you could probably get 10 times the amount of term insurance for the same price, right? If you had that insurable interest. So from a term insurance standpoint, right, this is obviously way cheaper than $40,000 a year up here. So with that being said, the problem is odds are you're going to live past 20 years at 47, right? You're only 67 at that time. So now you have to factor, okay, when we convert this to extend it, right? When we convert, or if we have to purchase new, meaning new medicals in 10 years or whatever, right? What is that cost increase going to look like? Now, I'm not saying that's what we're going to go through with the attorney, but those are the two bullet points that I'm going to talk about, right? And so I might, in the back of my head, say, hey, every year, you wait on this, there's a 5% increase, right? As like being prepared for a meeting is important, right? So they'll be like, oh, well, if we wait 10 years, how much is that going to be? And you can say, oh, this is going to go from, or you could highlight like age 50. And I don't know the answer to this, but I will before I go age 50, the premium's going to be $55,000 a year, right? So, or 55. Like if we wait 7 years before we convert this to 55, the premium is going to be $55K for a GUL, right? So those are kind of the decisions that you have to think about. Okay. Now, does that make sense? Same amount of insurance, same everything, just different time period. So, now, everybody with me so far? Okay, last one. Why would tell me a reason? We went through 2 of the reasons not to, but give me a reason of why they think owning whole life inside that trust would be beneficial. Somebody give me what they think.
Because it'll actually grow to the point where it's going to be past the 5 million if he lives to 30 plus years.
That's a good one. That's a good reason, but what else? Okay, you can use the money to make more. That's only if the attorney structures a trust that you have access to it. So just keep that in mind, Dan. I'm looking for one more. I'm looking for one key one to see if anybody gets it.
Oh boy, quick question. Wouldn't the money grow anyway?
Well, the money would grow anyways. But if you don't have access to the money, what good is the money?
Yeah, because I thought you were using the death benefit to cover the taxes anyway, because it's about the death benefit.
Yeah, but if I have to pay $60,000 to have the same death benefit up front and have it grow, right? What's the difference of me? And I'm going to show you guys that comparison, right? That's what we're about to do. But how long do I have to wait paying the same amount of premium? Because I promise you, $40,000 of premium into whole life is not going to give me $5 million for this guy. It will eventually go past $5 million, right? But then the question is okay, well, what happens if something happens to me in the first 35 years, right? Or first 30 years, whenever that crossover point is, that's a gamble, right? We don't know which one it is. And if we're trying to match $5 million, right? And I'm going to run these quotes right now. Let's just say it's $50,000 for the whole life to give me $5 million of coverage, right? Right off the bat. The question then becomes, well, if I just spend $50,000 on the GUL, do I get $7 million of coverage, right? So I'm not saying one's right or wrong. I would agree with you. I like putting whole life in general, but I'm trying to tell you what you're going to come across. If you come across an estate planning attorney, they're going to look at the dollar sign and they're going to look at the death benefit that it's purchasing and how much do you fight it, okay? So I'm just warning you every time I get into this argument. Luckily, I kind of know, like the CPA I know is like on my side, and I don't know the estate plan. When I go to talk to the estate planning attorney, it's gonna be the first time, besides just email exchanges that we've had. So, anybody else have any other ideas?
You said the benefit of having the trust own the whole life would be because the death benefit, if it is owned by the insured, is going to be included as part of their estate total.
Correct. Yeah, that's for sure. That's regardless. That's why.
If it's owned by the estate, by the trust, it wouldn't be.
Correct. But that's not the reason I'm looking for. I'm looking for why would you want to own, if whole life was more expensive, all right, let's take this assumption. If whole life was more expensive in general, which it is, right? Yes, you get a lot more value out of it. Yes, there's a lot of benefits. If I didn't have access to the cash, let's eliminate the cash. If this product was more expensive, why would I want to own it inside this trust? With any other benefit?
You can have a term rider.
You can. All right, that's a good one too. But you're right there. I'm looking for like the general. Like you're right. You guys are right there. I'm just trying to see if you guys get it. Any other ideas? I would say that's the term rider is included in my big reason why I would say whole life is better.
Maybe the tax growth, tax advantage.
No. All right. So the biggest reason is flexibility. With a GUL in term, if you miss any payment ever, what happens to the coverage? If I missed 90 days of payments with my GUL and my term, what happens?
It lapses and it's gone.
Say that again?
It lapses and it's gone.
Correct. So 30 years of making this payment of $40,000 into this GUL product, right? Guy's 80 years old, and something happens and his bank draft gets all messed up, or he goes into the hospital and nobody forgets about this. Guys, 30 years, I'm going to be 65, right? If you know, you have to think about these things, right? And all of a sudden, this guy goes 6 months and doesn't pay his premium. What's going to happen to that GUL? The answer is it's probably going to lapse, right? Because there's going to be no more cash in there, right? And so then the question is, hey, if it costs me $45,000 a year, right, for the same amount of coverage, and I don't know that it will. We're going to run it right now, and I'm just running it. Let me try to pull up an illustration. But how much is having that ability where, hey, if I need 1 year's or 2 years of premium payments to be made, right, from the cash value, is that worth it to me? Is that flexibility where if I start missing payments or anything like that, is that valuable? And the answer might be no. You know, a lot of these guys are, like, it'd be like me and you missing our term payment, right? Like, hey, I'm going to make sure that I pay my $60 a month term bill every month on auto draft, and like, I'll make sure that it doesn't. So, but you can see how you can make a pretty strong argument of like, hey,
What's up?
and I'm going to run, I haven't run this, so I'm trying to multitasking here. It's hard to talk.
What's up?
Multitask, so
Allison
now
was
when it
just
comes to
wondering if
whole
they could
life,
borrow an extension
right, you have
cord,
two
an
ways
outdoor
to
one.
design
It's
it,
just
right?
photograph.
So I've mentioned this a few times in previous videos.
Um,
You can design whole life for
it's for those
the
little
least
blow-up
amount of
things
premium
and,
for the most amount of death benefit, right?
it's a
So
really short cord,
I'm
so
not
I'm-
concerned about high early cash value in this situation.
Well, that's the point. What does she need? How big?
And just to be clear, guys, like, I already have a lot of cash value insurance on this guy that he owns individually that he uses. Okay, so this is like totally separate conversation. So this is, hey, we're trying to maximize death benefit. So the best way to maximize death benefit, and I'm going to show you guys both,
They're getting ready to head out.
is
I mean, I'll have
using
a
those
shower.
term blends, right? The client can overfund it in the future if they need the death benefit to grow faster. That's why we're trying to mirror it as close to, because the GUL is not going to increase. So if we do a term blend, and I'm going to share my screen in 1 second, we can design it to stay level, and eventually it will surpass pass. Okay. So I'm going to switch sharing my screen, right? So we basically have three things, right? We said the term was about 8,500, okay? The GUL to age 100 was 40,000. Okay. So I don't have the actual illustration, but I can tell you that so you can see here, expiration is age 67, okay? So the death benefit at age 85 is going to be 0. The cash value at age 85 is going to be 0. And we know that he's going to put in this times 20 years. So he's going to put in 170,000, and at life expectancy, he's going to have nothing. Okay. Now, obviously, if he converted it or any of those things, yes, that would matter. The GUL, he's going to pay $40,000. He's 47, so that's 38 years. Okay. There will be a small cash value at 65. I would say maybe $100,000. I'm going to put a big question mark next to that because I'm not sure. I have to run a certain illustration to get that. And then death benefit 85, we know that it's still going to be 5 million, not 55. Okay, and we know that equals this. So 1.5 million to get 5 million. Okay, so now we're on the whole life. Okay, so I'm documenting what I would do. So you could use Lafayette and use the term rider. You could use Emeritus and use the term rider, but they don't have the term blend. So to me, we are using One America, Guardian, or Mass. You can split it between two carriers. The benefit of splitting it between two carriers is you can reduce pay up one of them, let the other one continue to pay. You have a little bit more flexibility on dropping premiums. The negative is now I have to manage two policies instead of one, and that can, over a long period of time, be annoying, right? So just a couple of things, a couple high-level notes, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what I call a 50-50 blend between a half base, half blended whole life, okay? So we are going to, so you can see $2.5 million initial face amount, and then we are going to come on the next page here and add that EBIR, and we are going to add 2.5 million, and we're going to let it mature persistency. I think this will calculate it correctly. So again, the whole life 121, because that's the cheapest price to get to the death, right? The most amount of death benefit for the least amount of price, right? I'm trying to compare it to a GUL right now. We're going to run this. We're going to see. I'm not sure if it's going to calculate right, but okay. So the same $5 million, right? And so here's where you have to be careful, right? So this is, again, dividend dependent. So I need to add. So here's what you can do. You can add blended accelerator, and let's just add an extra 10,000. Okay. So I'm adding a little bit of PUA to make sure that term blend stays okay, right? Because again, the term blend is all based on dividends, so you want to pair. But what ends up happening that you have to be careful of is if things only do as the guaranteed, you can see that I'm only at this. Let me zoom in for you guys here. So on the non-guaranteed side, we're fine. $5 million. You can see the 1 year blended term is decreasing, meaning it's getting more and more towards whole life, right? But even here, I need to change it to we want to make sure it stays at least level, right? So I'm recalculating it now. Okay, so, and I would fine tune this to make sure, obviously maybe lower the base a little bit, keeping the premium the same, but you can see, okay, so on the non-guaranteed side, right, we're paying $62,000 to have $5 million, right? But you can see that, and you can see the cash value is increasing, right? You can see at 20 years, we have 1.3 million of cash, right? So then the question becomes but I'm also paying $20,000 more per year for the same death benefit. Okay, so hold on, let me put this in the chart, and then we're going to change it a little bit here. Trying to find the right one. Okay, so 62,000. So the cash value, death benefit 85 is still 5 million. equals this. Okay. So let's change this to cash value at age 80, and I would have bet this one will be 0, right? But at age 80, see how much cash we have in here. At age 80, there's $2.8 million of cash. Okay, so again, right, I'm putting in, like, see how much flexibility. Now, yes, you have a good estate planning attorney, they are going to be able to do this. But if I match this 40,000 to this GUL, I will not have $5 million, right? If I just ran a pure, so like the other route we could go, right, is let's just compare. And guys, I'm not really looking at the screen, so if you guys have questions or need me to slow down or whatever, you gotta just speak up. Okay, so we're gonna run 2 million here, and then we're gonna do a so we're gonna lower the 2 million there. We are then going to do a term rider, right, for 30 years for 3 million, right? So that gives them the total of the total of 5 million. Okay, and let's just see. So what we're going to do first is we're going to see how much that costs, and then what we'll do is we'll add PUA, which will increase the death benefit faster and increase the cash value to see if we get a little closer to. All right, so $51,000, right? But you can see here we're only at 2.7 million when this term falls off, right? So let's just see if we added. Just add 10 grand and see if that works. So again, the problem with whole life is, again, one of the negatives is it's complex. It's hard to understand. You know, it's much more complex. It's more confusing, but it gives you more flexibility, right? So even here, I still, going the term rider route, if we zoom in, I still don't have 5 million of coverage at the end of 30 years, right? So if I'm doing an apples to apples comparison, this just isn't getting us there. Right, and so I can run mass, I can run anything, but it's just not like if I ran a pure, like, just so you guys can see how expensive like a pure whole life is, right? If we just ran 47, select preferred. And this just gives me like a good indicator of like the price of just, hey, if I don't care about cash, I don't care about the term blend, I just want a $5 million policy, right? It's $100,000 a year for 5 million. Now, in 30 years, right, at 85, it's going to be $12 million, right? But I'm paying 2.5 times the amount of money, right? So if I know I can get 40,000 for 5 million, well, 80 grand is going to get me 8 million, right? So I'm like I'm getting all that. I'm getting 8 million all up front, right? For this, or no, I'm getting 10 million for 80,000 with a GUL. So again, there's this give and take on, okay, how much is this extra $22,000 a year worth it, right? Because let me ask you this, do I do and this is like conversation. So this is like, I'm going to present this out in second week of December. So, and this is a question that I ask myself. If I was in this client's shoes, right, and I was aware of the situation and I'm trying to be proactive, do I say, hey, I'll pay $40,000 a year now, and then I'll add another 20-year term for $8,500, right? So I'm still $12,000 to $15,000 cheaper than the whole life, and I have twice as much coverage for at least the next 20 years. How do you argue that? Thoughts? I'm open to thoughts. This is like where I want some, back and forth. Different perspectives is how we learn, how I used to learn. So feel free to give me your thoughts on different creative ideas or scenarios that you think are worth comparing. This is the time.
That's still only 20 years.
Yeah, but then I have the ability to convert. So I set up a future sale for myself when this client goes from a $25 million net worth to a $50 million net worth. You can't solve everyone's estate tax problem, because what happens if, and I'm not saying this is going to happen, but in this guy's situation, what happens if they made pet care like health care, where you could have insurance for your pet, and I'm not talking like the pet insurance that's out there now. I'm talking about our health insurance. That would completely change his industry, So in this case, he's very well isolated and very well insulated. But, if you were a logging company or something, and all of a sudden people moved away from, lumber and moved to steel or whatever, right? You just don't know. So to say this guy's going to be worth 75 million is a tough, yeah, I think you are, but those types of people don't want to assume that until they get there. And then guess what? If he's 65 years old and he's worth 50 million, well, guess what? What is an extra $100,000 of premium then at that time? You know what I mean? So that I'm just telling you the way they think.
But in that same situation, if you converted it 10 years from now, and the GUL at that point costs you 55 instead of 40, that's an extra $15,000 that's got to be calculated over the course of that next 28 years. The $7,000 difference actually may not be $7,000. It may come out.
I'm talking about, though, if I did that in addition to the GUL. You do the GUL now plus the term. Do both, 10 million right now. Still $12,000 less than the whole life.
Until you convert.
Yeah, until you can convert, but I'm still getting twice the amount of coverage for less money. It's a hard argument. I'm willing to listen. I'm just telling you, it's a hard argument to say, hey, I'm going to save you $12,000 a year and I'm going to give you twice as much coverage. And I'm still going to give you the ability to convert the other half whenever you want to.
But when you convert the other half, what's that going to cost?
Let's say it's $55,000. So let's say it's $15,000 more. So now I'm paying $105,000 for $10 million.
When, after the calculations you just did, the whole life is going to be worth 12, and it's only costing you 62.
No. The pure whole life for $10 million, or the $5 million whole life, is 62, but that's only 5 million. It doesn't grow past that. If I want it to grow to 12, it's 105,000 a year.
So it's the same thing. It's the same 100. Well, actually, it's 10,000 more.
It's 10,000 more, and I'm paying that now versus starting it in 10 years.
All right, that's fair.
So I'm saving 50 grand for the next 10 years. I'm saving $500,000. I'm just saying it's a tough argument. Now, this guy I know likes whole life because he likes cash, right? But you can't worry about the cash. I'm worried about the death benefit, and who's going to say that he lives to 85?
Okay, but if all things stay equal and he does live to 85, the whole life, even at the 105, puts him out at 12 at the end of the day. The $500,000 that you're saving.
Non-guaranteed? I mean, do we want to go down the non-guaranteed route?
If we're just using the numbers, the $500,000 you're saving, you're still coming out 1.5 ahead on the back end, and that's going to be closer to $13 million tax bill anyway.
Yeah.
That's the counter argument.
Yeah, it's just paying.
One way or the
you know, it's like I got to get him to spend an additional $50,000 today.
That is correct.
So, I'm not opposed to that, but I can tell you he's not going to like that idea. Like in all honesty, So that's the going back and forth, right? So it's arming yourself with that ammunition to, now the other argument is, okay, well, if I do the 62,000 now and then I start adding $40,000 a year to it in 5 years, right? We do the blend and through paid up additions and do it that way, right? Then you're right. I'm going to end up being relatively at the equal spot and I have the cash. The problem is if this attorney doesn't set it up where I have access to the cash, right? Then what? Right? And so that's why it's a matter of, I don't know what I'm walking into, right? The attorneys, and I quote, said, yeah, we're ready to start working on this estate plan. Bring your proposals, like, quote, Ralph, it was like, hey, Ralph told me you know what you're doing, bring your proposals and let's discuss. So that's what we're doing, right? So this is entry level, or not entry level, but this is entry meeting. It's going to be probably, multiple meetings, 6 months of planning. The guy's going to tell me what he thinks. The CPA is going to say, hey, his business is worth probably X with X multiples. And, I know the client wants to sell in 5 years. So that's where we're at, right? And so the last thing that I wanted to show you guys, because I know we're a few minutes over, is a GUL, a joint survivorship, right? So there are survivorship whole lives, but there's also survivorship GULs, okay? So basically what that means is think of second to die. So a second to die policy means the death benefit doesn't pay out upon the first death, right? It only pays out on the second death, which from a standpoint of where, if the trust is the beneficiary anyways, right? Like the estate tax isn't triggered until the second person dies, right? Both spouses die, boom, that's when estate taxes are really triggered. So if we looked at and this one's easy because there's only like 2 companies that are doing survivorship GULs. One is Pru. So look at that difference. 28,000, right? They're both 47 years old. 28,000 for the same 5 million. Okay, and this is all on guaranteed results. Okay, so we know guaranteed. So at age 85, there's no more cash. Okay, so 28,000. Age 100, 5 million. Cash by at age 80, death benefit at age 85, 5 million. And we've put in this times 38. So the question is it worth an extra $500,000 to not do a joint? So now let me throw this around. Why wouldn't I just do 10 million in this? And now I'm paying the same price and I'm getting 10 million. The same price as the whole life.
What's the ultimate number? The 5 million, the 10 million seems more plausible than the 5 in general.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Right? But here's the way that I take it is I can take these numbers, right? And all I got to do is multiply by 2. Solve for 10 million. Hey, all I got to do is, if the number's 15, all I got to do is multiply by 3. If the estate planning attorney says, hey, let's inch our way into it, I can cut these numbers in half, right? To
Gotcha.
Get to 2.5 each, and I leave 2.5 to convert and 2.5 from one of these angles, right? So it's hard to I can run an analysis that says, yeah, your estate tax problem is going to be 75 million, right? And then boom, you're at $25 million thing. But the attorney might say, hey, I can carve out all of that real estate and get it out of the trust, right? Over the next 20 years and you'll be fine. I don't know what he's going to say, right? So I'm just coming with a sample to have a conversation.
Nice.
But you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
5 million is not really, it's helping, but it's definitely not solving the problem. But you have to remember that this guy has term insurance, he has whole life. Yes, it's part of the estate right now. So
would you be
People
replacing those policies then? I mean, or
no,
okay.
Yeah, no, because those are like his wife owns the business with him, right? So technically, like that, she would get the business, and so like that estate doesn't trigger until she passes away.
Okay.
So technically, if something happens to him, she just needs to be able to keep running the business, which she would struggle for sure. But so yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at. Any other questions? Is this helpful to see something like this? I know this is like a little different. That's why I brought it to bring it in today. So I'm trying to bring different cases that you guys. So when you guys come across it, it's not your first time seeing that type of scenario.
Yeah, maybe a related conversation is about how to identify and manage referral partners / centers of influence, because I think that's a challenge for sure.
For which side, like the CPA and the attorney?
Either way. Yeah, either way. I don't have a good CPA. I've been in the business for 4 years, and I've never found a CPA that I trust.
Yeah, welcome to the club. I've gone through two. Like the problem is the good CPAs don't want small clients. They want medium sized businesses. Very few of them want the small guy. And if they do take the small guy, they overcharge, which is not necessarily like they have to, right? Like it's like,
yeah, makes sense. Their time is that valuable. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'll put it this way. I think my wife's firm is very good, but I've never sent them a thing because they're too expensive. I mean, they deal with higher net worth than this guy, right? So it's like a tough, and they have all their own stuff, so I don't get any business from her. It's very difficult to find. I've gone through 2 CPAs where I've referred a ton of business for a high income earner, like individuals. Never got a referral back, and so I move on to another one. Unfortunately, it's a trial and error kind of thing. To meet people. I hate going to networking events, but when I go to networking events, I don't look for clients. I look for centers of influence. So that's what I go for. So
I do have a good estate planning attorney. I do have that.
The problem with estate planning attorneys is good ones are only in like that state, most of them, or 2 states.
This guy can work in any state, and he's good. He's a client too. But yeah, the challenge also with estate planning attorneys is it's still a one-way street. You give them referrals and you don't really get anything back.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
this guy's a client, so I can't say I've got nothing out of him.
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple great estate planning attorneys that are in New York, Florida, but a lot of times people like estate planning attorneys that they can go see, right? Like that's still a business that they like to discuss. Some of the younger generation is getting past that, but like this guy, like this will be a meeting, like in person in Miami at his office. Like it's when you're dealing with people with this much money, they definitely like to see you and shake your hands before doing business. So just kind of keep that in mind. I'm trying to put a program together. My mentor Dan, who you'll be seeing him on the Premier program here. He's got 30 years of experience and he has all these centers of influence, but it takes a long time. So he's going to do a couple trainings on how to sniff out good centers of influence versus bad centers of influence. But if I had the answer, I would share it. So, but yeah, so that's that. And hopefully you guys can see, but I promise you with that estate tax sunset, you guys will start to come across people that weren't going to have that problem, but now are going to have that problem. And so it's a good opportunity for you to be ahead of it and just be a little educated and be able to at least hold a conversation when you do come across those situations. So that's all I got.
Hey Tyler, what if we did have questions? I know you mentioned before. What's the best avenue? Is it on the Discord? Just email?
Yeah, message me on Discord.
Okay.
I mean, if you have my email signature, I have like my calendar in there. I'm not opposed to you guys texting me, like if it's like a phone call kind of thing. So I'm pretty flexible.
Okay.
But yeah, so that this is just. I'll put it this way, guys. This is a good market to be in if you have connections in this area. I'll say that, right? Because it's not about cash. It's not a. It's you're solving for high death benefit, high. This is full. And I'm not a commission guy, but this is full commission product here. This is no overfunding. This is, because that's not the goal. The goal is, hey, I'm solving for. I make all this money over here, and the government's gonna take 40% of anything above X, and so how do I limit that pain? That's what we're solving for. So hopefully this was helpful. Next week I have a big real estate guy that I'm trying to finally pin down, so I'm gonna go through that with you guys. Cool. On a big overfunded policy. He asked me to show a sample of him using it to build his house versus financing it, so we'll go through like that whole thing. I'm gonna try my best to have 85% of it like prepared, so then we can just go through it together. So that'll be next week. I'll make that announcement, and we'll see you guys there. Any other questions?
Thank you.
All right, guys. Have a good day.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Tyler.